Welcome back to my channel. Today I will tell you a story that happened in France in 1995 where a family of 4 senselessly lost their lives. The amateur video shows a family gathering in the garden in front of the house. Adults are sitting in swimming costumes on deck chairs. In the background you can hear fragments of conversations and happy shouts of children splashing in the pool. The weather is beautiful. It's a harrowing documentary as it depicts the final reunion of a family that 48 hours later will be almost completely destroyed. On Tuesday, May 30th, 1995, 25-year-old Samantha Bebien, a married woman and mother of 3 young children, is sitting in her apartment in the village of Saint-Andiol-le-Château, France, Rhône department, in the evening. When it reaches 7 p.m., the phone rings. Samantha picks up, but for the first few moments she is unable to comprehend at all what the woman on the phone is saying to her. The meaning of her words reaches Samantha only after a delay of several seconds. Her parents' house is on fire. Their neighbor calls. She says the fire department is already on the scene, but the fire is very strong. No one knows at this point whether anyone was in the house when the fire broke out. A distraught Samantha immediately runs to her neighbors and asks them to take care of her children, while she herself gets into the car and heads out. There's only one image before her eyes. It's her parents, Odette and Vincent Bebien, and her 2 younger siblings, 16-year-old Aline and 21-year-old Vincent Jr. Were they at home? Were they at home? These words ring incessantly in Samantha's head. The house lies just a few kilometers away, so the young woman quickly arrives at the site. Clouds of smoke can be seen in the distance. The property is full of police and fire trucks. Neighbors, gathered in a cluster, stand nearby, behind the part of the site that is secured with tape. Firefighters are still busy extinguishing the fire. The building is completely destroyed. The ground around it is even scorched. It is clear that the fire was huge. Samantha is completely devastated as she watches the roof of her family home collapse. The work of destruction is so enormous that both she and other witnesses to the drama realize one thing: whoever was in the building will not get out alive. Samantha is joined by her husband, Eric. The two helplessly watch what is happening. Several more minutes pass when a policeman approaches the couple. Samantha later said that as soon as the officer looked at her, she already knew what he would have to tell her. "We found 4 bodies," the young woman hears, after which she collapses into her husband's arms. As of now, it is still unknown what caused the fire, but everyone tentatively assumes that the cause was a gas explosion or an electrical short circuit. This theory seems to be confirmed by the testimonies of neighbors, as several of them state that around 6:45 p.m. they heard a not-so-loud explosion, and immediately afterwards the Bebien family's house went up in flames. News of the death of 4 people in the fire instantly reaches the local media, and several journalists are already on the scene. They are standing in front of cameras near the house, with clouds of smoke rising in the background. It is the reporters who are the first to report the latest news, which is causing shock throughout France. All members of the Bebien family were shot first, and the fire only broke out after their deaths. Throughout the night, services are working intensively at the scene of the tragedy. In the morning, the police have preliminary findings. All the household members were shot with small-caliber gun. The perpetrators waited for their victims inside the house for many hours during the day, as it is known that the family members returned there at completely different times. The bodies are located in various rooms on the first floor of the house. Several bullets were fired at each of the family members. After the latest murder, the rooms were doused with gasoline and set on fire to cover the tracks. Firefighters even found 2 charred gasoline canisters. Everything gives the impression of an execution, but no one has any idea who wanted to annihilate the entire family or why. Investigators already know that the Bebien family is completely ordinary. None of its members has a police record. Nothing is known about any conflicts in the neighborhood. It's a normal family, with parents who love their children and care about their upbringing and education. Also, Samantha and her husband had an excellent relationship with her relatives, which both emphasize. They met frequently, celebrated birthdays together, and saw each other on other occasions. In fact, such a joint meeting took place just 2 days before the tragedy, on Sunday, May 28th, on the occasion of Mother's Day. Everyone was sitting in the garden. The weather was great. Samantha and Eric came with their children. The toddlers played in the pool with their 16-year-old Aunt Aline, while the event was filmed by 21-year-old Vincent. A virtually undamaged videotape with amateur film of the event will soon be discovered by the police, as the tape is one of the items found in the charred rubble. The description of the latter party, provided by its surviving participants, turns out to be 100% true. The video shows smiling family members sitting fully relaxed in the sun among the greenery. It is hard to believe that several of them will be killed 48 hours later by execution. This picture of a compliant, even idyllic family life is confirmed by neighbors, friends, and extended family members. The Lyon police are investigating. A special committee of 30 police officers is formed, and its members immediately get to work intensively. Investigators at this point are particularly troubled by the case of the dog. Odette and Vincent had a German Shepherd. The dog recognized only household members and immediate family members, while he was very distrustful of unfamiliar people. Whenever a stranger appeared near the house, the dog barked very loudly and behaved aggressively, so such a person would certainly not dare to enter the property. The German Shepherd was so threatening that when Bebien's family had guests, they had to tie him up or lock him in another room. So why didn't any of the neighbors hear the dog barking on the day the tragedy occurred? Does this mean that the dog knew the perpetrator? Police officers initially formulate the following theory: someone in the family first shot his fellow residents and then committed suicide. Naturally, in such a case, there must be a gun or at least its burned remains at the scene. The search of the ruins is still underway, but soon investigators are sure that the weapons have not been found. The version with murders ending in suicide must therefore be rejected. When the autopsy results come in, it is already possible to determine the time of death of all the people. Based on this data and other findings to date, including ballistic and blood traces, police officers are reconstructing the course of events of the tragic day. They are also determining that the perpetrator acted alone. Odette, who is a nurse by profession, worked at a hospital in the nearby town of Givers. On the night of May 29th to 30th, the woman had a night shift that ended at 7 a.m. After work, a friend drove Odette home. They were almost to their destination when they were passed by the car of her son-in-law Eric, who was giving Odette signs that he would stop by for coffee soon. It was a regular habit of theirs. Eric would often stop by to see his in-laws for coffee before leaving for work. So at 7:30 a.m. Odette and her husband and son-in-law sat down to their morning coffee. The meeting lasted until 7:45 a.m., when Vincent Sr., as usual at this time, had to leave for work. Shortly afterwards, he said goodbye, and so did Eric. Odette was thus left alone and most likely went to bed to sleep off the night. As a rule, she went to bed at 8:15 a.m., so it can be assumed that she was killed no earlier than that hour. The murderer shot her as she slept. Around 11:30 a.m., son Vincent returned home. This is certain because one of the neighbors noticed how Vincent drove his car up to the house, climbed the stairs, and closed the front door behind him. Immediately after, Vincent Jr. was hit by 3 bullets. Between 12 p.m. and 12:30, his father came to the house. The murderer was waiting for him in the kitchen and from there fired several shots at him. Aileen's daughter was seen getting off the bus at 5 p.m. as usual. Later, one of her neighbors observed the girl enter the house. Although the woman was unable to determine the exact time of this observation, but knowing Aileen's habits and the distance from the bus stop to the house, it was easy to determine that the teenager must have arrived there at 5:30 p.m. at the latest. The bullet reached her just after she went inside and closed the door. The bang was heard by neighbors at 6:45 p.m. According to police, the murder was carefully planned and precisely executed. The perpetrator, after shooting each person, dragged the body to another room and mopped the floor so as not to frighten another person entering the house. Who could be someone with enough cold blood to not only carry out 4 executions, but to stay in the house for a total of many hours while the corpses of the murdered are in the rooms next door? Is there anyone like that in the family's circle? Investigators are looking for a motive, because there must have been one. They focus first on the younger members of the family. Aline and Vincent love soccer. They are fans of the Club L'Olympique Lyonnais and are in contact with a group of its fans called the Bad Gones, which is known for various street brawls and even acts of violence. So could this have been about a spat between the fans of the group, while one of the aggressors decided to take revenge on the whole family? Or perhaps he had no such plans, but once he got into the house, events spun out of control? The lead seems a good one, especially since a new plot unexpectedly emerges in the ongoing case, namely, one of the neighbors testifies that on the tragic day, a few hours before the fire broke out, a young man was hanging around outside the Bebien family's house. The woman knows him by sight. She knows that his name is Christophe and that he was a good friend of young Vincent Bebien. That day Christophe stayed quite a while outside Vincent's house. He would stop or walk between cars standing nearby, listening to music. It looked as if he was waiting for someone. The young man was also seen by several other witnesses. When investigators check the information on Christophe, for the first time something in the case begins to come together, for it turns out that the young man belongs to the Bad Gones. Neighbors also say that they saw him often on walks with the Bebien family's dog, as he took care of it when they were absent for a long time. So the dog was friendly with Christophe. This information is very important for the investigators. The man is immediately questioned. He testifies that he had an appointment with Vincent after his work, as they were supposed to go together to meet with colleagues. As agreed, he showed up at the family's house before 1 p.m. He knocked on the door, but no one opened it for him. He started tapping on the windows to no avail. He was surprised, because there was a friend's car outside the house. Christophe waited a little longer, went somewhere, returned in a while. He knocked again, also on the windows, but, as before, there was no answer, so he went to the meeting alone, without Vincent. The policeman asked Christophe why he didn't just try to go inside. The man says he is not in the habit of entering other people's houses uninvited, and besides, why would he do that? There was no one inside after all. Christophe answers all questions in a confident voice and without hesitation, while his explanations sound coherent. Intuition tells the investigators that the young man is telling the truth. Naturally, the same day they check the information given. Everything is confirmed, and at the same time it turns out that at 5:30 p.m., when Aline was shot, Christophe was still at the meeting he was originally supposed to go to with Vincent, so he is not the murderer. Investigators are thus back to square one. Meanwhile, the day of the family's funeral arrives. Crowds gather in front of the church, as the nationally publicized case has attracted a lot of people from near and far. Emotions are running high. 4 coffins carried one after another is a shocking sight. Among those attending the funeral are officers in civilian clothes, whose job is to discreetly observe the ceremony, as well as film it. The police officers have eyes and ears open, paying attention to literally everything, even the simple comments of the funeral attendees. No one yet knows that this strategy will be successful, and it will originate in mere gossip. They concern Samantha's clothing. At the funeral, the young woman is admittedly all in black, but the skirt she is wearing does not even reach her knees. Criticism is heard from various sides. People whisper that it is not decent to dress like this for the funeral of parents and siblings. There are comments that Samantha is a happy heiress. It is possible that she is pleased with the death of her loved ones or even has something to do with it. Investigators are beginning to explore this thread. Admittedly, at first they ruled out the spouse's involvement in the murders, as each of them showed their alibis. However, perhaps something was overlooked in the investigation? Either way, both Samantha and Eric would have fit the profile of the perpetrator. They belonged to the people closest to the murdered, they knew their habits, the dog treated them as its own. They could have played it out in such a way that Eric acted at the scene of the crime, while Samantha helped him with the preparations. Police officers are gathering more detailed information about the couple. Eric and Samantha became a couple when they were still teenagers. In 1987, their first child was born, 2 more followed. It seems that the marriage is happy. The police do not come across information about major conflicts or quarrels. Samantha is considered by all to be a loving daughter, while her husband had an excellent relationship with his in-laws. Many people point out that Eric Brios is very ambitious. This 27-year-old already has his own company, which produces metal entrance gates. All indications are that Eric is an ideal son-in-law, but investigators are distrustful. Rather, they get the impression that he is a careerist who wants to prove to everyone around him that he will go very far. So they dig further into his life, and indeed, there are flaws in this perfect picture. The cops learn that Eric has huge financial problems, of which, by the way, his family has no idea. Investigators also receive information that the man has had similar problems in the past. He started various companies, but each of them eventually failed. His in-laws wanted to help him, so they recently took out a large loan. With the money, Eric was to get back on his feet and expand his current company. For the time being, the spouses are repaying the amount regularly, although, it seems, not without difficulty. Could it be that they planned the murder of 4 people to get rid of the debt and inherit Samantha's parents' assets? The couple is asked to talk at the police station. Eric gives the impression of being confident and has an answer to every question. Again, he gives a very detailed description of what he did hour after hour on that fateful day. After visiting his in-laws, he went to the company, then home, where he had dinner with his wife and children at 1:30. At 1:30 p.m., he was back at the company and had many business meetings. By 6:30 p.m., he was already sitting in the bar, where he is a regular customer. He left the premises at 7 p.m. when he learned of the tragedy, so he is known to have an alibi for the explosion. Samantha also has an alibi. Over the course of almost a full day, she drove and picked up her children from school one by one and did some shopping. The couple is outraged that the police suspect them of something. Investigators dig into the case and determine that, yes, Eric was in the bar at the time of the explosion, but his alibi for the hours of the murders is very uncertain. The man claims he was in his workshop and in the office, but fails to confirm this. None of the employees saw him there. Eric did not make a call from his landline phone, nor did anyone call him on that phone. Spouses are becoming increasingly suspicious. On June 14th, the police decide to detain the two and interrogate them in separate rooms, of course. Investigators believe that Eric was the murderer and that his wife was his right hand. Samantha strongly denies her involvement in the murders. She defends her husband. She is sure that he also has nothing to do with the tragedy that happened to her family. Eric also does not admit to anything. However, the situation changes when the investigators show him a photo of one of the burned canisters. On the face of the interrogator, emotion can be seen for the first time. Finally, Eric confesses that he will tell what really took place. He stresses that he is not a murderer, then begins his story. At 5:30 p.m. he entered his in-laws' house. No one answered the knock, and the door was open. He saw that every member of the household was dead. He was shocked. Then he thought he would set the house on fire just so his wife wouldn't get shocked at the sight of so many bodies. So he poured gasoline over everything, cut the candle into 2 equal parts and placed one of them on the gasoline-poured floor. It was known that the candle would only constitute an ignition after melting. This in turn would take tens of minutes, while he would not draw suspicion on himself. Police officers do not believe this version, but now at least they know how Eric caused the explosion, while providing himself with an excellent alibi. Immediately after this part of the interrogation, the investigators repeat to his wife what they just heard. Samantha is devastated, and for a long time she can't even get a word out. Finally, answering the investigator's question, she says she doesn't believe the motivation given by her husband. It comes to the woman that he is the perpetrator of the 4 murders. The suspect still does not admit to murdering 4 people and creates several more different versions of what happened on May 30th. However, police believe they have enough evidence to complete their investigation and file an indictment. Eric's relatives and friends are in complete shock. How is it possible that this young man planned the murder of his wife's parents and siblings in cold blood and calmly went home for dinner between the murders? As for the motivation, the psychiatrist's expert puts forward the following thesis: the accused was not only concerned with the inheritance, he was mainly driven by pride and ambition. The goal and meaning of Eric's life was to have recognition, to impress those around him with his resourcefulness, which was naturally also to be expressed in his wealth. Since, despite a loan from his in-laws, he failed once again to realize his ambitions, Eric decided to do it differently, in the only way he thought possible. In the course of further investigation, Samantha is freed from all suspicion. The trial of Eric Brias drags on for several years. On October 18, 1999, the man is sentenced to life imprisonment. Over the following years, Eric Brias seeks early release from prison, but without success. He succeeds only after serving 26 years. October 25, 2021, he leaves prison. According to French media reports, the court's decision was also influenced by the convict's poor health. Eric Brias to this day has not admitted his guilt. And that's the end of this horrific story. Goodbye.